Hello and thanks for joining me. Now in my last video I mentioned that I've gone out and bought an Olympus Pen E-P7 as an everyday walkabout camera. A couple of people wrote in and said they would be interested in my thoughts on it. Also, when I was looking to buy this, I discovered there wasn't a huge amount of information out, certainly not on YouTube, about this camera, so I thought I might as well add my two penneth. Unlike the OM1, which I most certainly won't be reviewing because there's a million reviews on that. And this isn't really going to be a review. I just thought I'd very briefly talk about why I decided to buy this camera and whether or not it's delivering on those reasons for buying it. So, first of all, it's really small and light. I wasn't really bothered about getting a camera with an EVF, because this is kind of a phone replacement insofar as I very rarely use the EVF for ordinary stills photography anyway, so I'm not missing it a bit. And rather than going for the EM10 or an EM5 even, which are nowhere near as small as this, I thought, yeah, I'm not going to use the EVF hardly at all, I'll use the screen. Now of course, unlike a phone, the screen articulates and I tend to shoot down at sort of waist height looking down at the screen, so that's really helpful. Also, being a short arse, the screen tilts around that way and that makes it really useful to hold the camera up in the air and get a bit of extra height, so that's a bonus. I've actually made use of that already. The key thing about this for me though that really swung it was what goes on inside this camera. It's got a 20 megapixel sensor that is exactly the same sensor as the EM1X and the EM1 Mark III. The processor is also the same, and so there's absolutely no compromise on quality of images. The only reason this is small and light is because a lot of the electronic features and bits and bobs that you can do with a bigger camera are missing. It's still, I just put it on full manual and it still takes great images as if it was in a body the size of an EM1X. It's also got Olympus's legendary stabilization, not quite as effective as the bigger cameras. This says that it'll do up to 4.5 stops. One of the images I'm going to show you shortly takes advantage of it, and it's really noticeable. When you half press the shutter, the screen absolutely freezes solid, and as long as you're not wobbling about like Bernard Bresslaw, it works really well. What else do I like about it? It's got two command dials. That's really important. The Pen Lite series only had one, but when I shoot, what I tend to do is I'll set the aperture, because the aperture tends to be the sort of thing that you go, right, I'm going to need f5.6, f8, f20, whatever for the shot, and then I'm adjusting ISO and shutter speed to fine-tune my manual exposure. So I've got those on the command dials. And that's one of the reasons why I never really got on with smartphone photography, because in order to change your shutter settings, even using, of course, a manual application that will collect raw data, you're still faffing about on your screen in order to take the shot. And I like the immediacy, particularly if I'm shooting something that's moving, like, say, seawater, as we're going to see. To experiment with the shutter speed as the waves are rolling in and out is much, much easier on a proper camera. The other thing about this is it comes with this 14 to 42 pancake lens, which most people, for some reason, seem to immediately put on the second-hand market and replace. I don't understand that at all. I actually had one of these lenses before I bought this. I couldn't find one of these with body only, so I've now got two of these lenses. No intention of being without one, because it's a really good lens. I've used it on my OM1 when I'm out and about, and I before I got this. But this is really, you know, with me every day. It's just a proper camera version of having my smartphone. So it will slip in a pocket. My everyday bag is this little 6-litre Bellroy sling, and it fits perfectly in there. Absolutely no problem at all. For the most part, and the images I'm going to share with you shortly are taken with this lens, no filters. That's another thing. It's just a case of see something interesting, have a bit of equipment to do a better job of it than with a smartphone. But I think from time to time I probably will carry it with this 14 to 150, so I've got a proper full zoom range, because I do find when I'm down the beach, for example, 42 isn't quite enough if there's some interesting light going on the mountains of the mainland. Really nothing much else to tell you about this. Oh, well, I suppose there is one thing. It does shoot 4K video, and you can shoot up to 29 minutes per file. It's not really something that I would use for my main channel work. The screen drops down underneath into a selfie mode and the image inverts, so you know you could use it for videoing yourself for vlogging, but it doesn't have a microphone input, and it's not what I bought it for. I don't use it for video work at all. I think that's about it. Let's have a look at some pictures. Now, of course, this camera is very much designed to accompany me on my dog walks, so it would be remiss of me not to have a dog picture. Thing about this is it allows me to drop the background out a little bit, which wouldn't happen with a smartphone, and also I'm usually working with a relatively aggressive dynamic range, and this camera does a far better job of working with that than a phone would. This next image again is experimenting with dynamic range and what I can pull out of the shadows. The light and shade in this sort of image, shot without any filters, would be a serious challenge, but the 20 megapixel sensor on this camera does a really good job of giving me enough data to work with in post. Another example of that is this image, where I was particularly interested in the shape that the light and shadow made on the beach. The sun was shining off the waves, so those were very bright highlights, and I shot it without clipping those highlights, but I was still able to pull detail out of the shadows on this. The sky was extremely bright in the raw file, and again I was able to make use of the shapes of the clouds by pulling that back using a graduated filter in post. Finally, just to finish up, this is shot at f20 on that little pancake lens, because I wanted a slow shutter speed. I've got a shutter speed of 1/10 of a second here, again using the built-in IBIS, and a shot that I absolutely couldn't have got if I was using my phone. Now, the thing about all of these images, I took the camera out for a dog walk specifically to make this video, so none of them are intended to be art for art's sake. They were just to demonstrate the camera. For the most part, none of those subjects would have had me reaching for my camera anyway. But nevertheless, what they did demonstrate is that the camera will do a really good job for no effort carrying it about. And so to answer the main question of is it delivering what I wanted from it, absolutely yes. I think that when I do find myself presented with a spectacular sunrise, or if I'm out and about in town, you know, I go to London on business, I can carry that with me, do some street photography, and it'll be completely dependable. So that's it. Olympus E-P7, highly recommended. Next time we'll be back to something a bit more interesting, some proper photography. Thanks for watching, really hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, why not subscribe and join me next time. Cheers.